Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the fascinating, highly calculated political playbook that built the modern FIFA empire. But more importantly, we're going to look at exactly why that same playbook, the one that worked flawlessly for them around the globe, is now seriously threatening to backfire ahead of the 2026 games. All right, let's just jump right in, because the mechanics behind the world's most popular sport are, frankly, wild. Back in 2022, right on the eve of the Qatar World Cup, FIFA President Gianni Infantino gave this heavily scrutinized speech. He famously declared, "Today I feel gay, today I feel disabled, today I feel a migrant worker." Now, at the time, the media jumped on this as a bizarre tirade, a total unhinged PR disaster. But we're not going to frame it as a gaffe today. Actually, it's a deliberate window into a highly effective global strategy.
And that brings us to the core question of today's explainer. How exactly did leaning into these intense political alliances cement Infantino's absolute power over the world's biggest sport? I mean, what looks like total chaos to some of us is, in reality, a masterclass in consolidating influence.
Here's a quick look at our agenda for today. We'll start with FIFA's unlikely king, then move on to expanding the beautiful game. Third, we'll look at the controversial political playbook, followed by supersizing the 2026 World Cup, and finally, how politics threatens the games. All right, part one, FIFA's unlikely king, rising from the ashes of 2015. Okay, so to really grasp the stakes for 2026, we've got to jump back a decade to 2015. This was literally rock bottom for FIFA's global reputation. The organization was raided, officials were slapped with racketeering, bribery, and wire fraud charges, and massive sponsors just fled. It cost them a staggering $360 million. Then, just a year later in 2016, Gianni Infantino steps up, and he wasn't some flashy superstar. People saw him as this obscure, safe technocrat who flew budget airlines and promised basic, sensible reform. Fast forward to 2018, though, he generates a record-breaking $4.6 billion in revenue at the World Cup in Russia. Talk about a turnaround.
So, what exactly did Infantino do with that mountain of cash? Well, he distributed an extra $5 million to every single one of FIFA's 209 member associations. Now, for the wealthy countries, sure, it was a nice little bonus. But for smaller nations like Cape Verde or Bhutan, that kind of money is absolutely transformational. And remember, in FIFA's system, every single nation gets exactly one vote. So this financial windfall effectively bought rock-solid loyalty from all over the globe.
Moving on to part two, expanding the beautiful game. More teams, more power. You see, handing out money was really just step one. Step two was fundamentally blowing up the size and scope of FIFA's biggest tournaments. He expanded the Women's World Cup to 32 teams. He supersized the Club World Cup from 7 to 32 teams. And, of course, he famously expanded the upcoming 2026 Men's World Cup to a massive 48 teams. These moves show exactly how he locked in those votes. More teams means more games. More games means more TV rights and more ticket sales. It basically meant a whole lot more member nations could grab a slice of that massive revenue pie, and ultimately they'd have Infantino to thank for it. But, there was a catch. Once that incredible loyalty was fully secured and his re-election was basically guaranteed, well, the era of Infantino acting like a humble budget airline servant abruptly came to an end. He started centralizing power. He ousted the ethics officials, got backing to extend his presidency right past the 3-term limit, and just started making these massive decisions completely single-handedly. The Reformer Act was over. He was now operating like a king.
Which leads us to part three, the controversial political playbook, courting host governments. Now that absolute power inside FIFA was locked down, Infantino turned his attention outward. He deployed a very specific strategy to maximize profits and keep the games running smoothly. He heavily courted controversial host leaders. I mean, we saw very friendly appearances with Vladimir Putin ahead of 2018. Before the 2022 games, he actually moved to Doha, flew on Qatari private jets, and forged really deep alliances with Saudi Arabia's monarchy. Even after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, he was still expressing hopes of bringing Russia back into the football landscape.
And honestly, this perfectly contextualizes that quote we looked at earlier. When human rights groups and Western media were heavily criticizing Qatar's treatment of the migrant workers building their stadiums, Infantino didn't apologize, not at all. Instead, he deflected, saying, "This is racism. This is pure racism." Now, that was no accident. It was a highly calculated move. He was signaling directly to audiences in the Middle East and the Global South that he would firmly shield them against Western lecturing. It proved to his base that, hey, I've got your back. All right, part 4. Supersizing the 2026 World Cup. the North American Gamble. This 2026 mega tournament, spanning the US, Mexico, and Canada, is without a doubt Infantino's biggest gamble yet. Why? Because the projected revenue is a mind-boggling $11 billion. With stakes that incredibly high, Infantino is aggressively applying his tried-and-true political playbook directly to the United States government.
To protect that massive revenue stream, Infantino is taking every imaginable step to court Donald Trump, treating him as the ultimate host nation leader. He's visited the White House at least 5 times recently. He showed up at Mar-a-Lago and the inauguration. He even wore a Trump hat at a peace summit. And get this, in a move that reportedly caught even his own FIFA colleagues completely off guard, he created a brand new award, the FIFA Peace Prize, specifically to give to Trump. He is literally applying the exact same playbook he used in Russia and Qatar right here in North America. Which brings us to part 5. Politics threatens the games, when the playbook backfires.
So here's where the story shifts dramatically, and it highlights exactly why politics is now severely threatening the 2026 games. Think about it. In the past, Infantino allied with monarchies or tightly controlled states where the domestic narrative is, well, easily managed. In those places, if the top leader agrees to something, it just gets done, no questions asked. But in 2026, he's running that exact same playbook in a decentralized, hyper-polarized democracy. In the US, buttering up the federal leader absolutely does not instantly command local municipalities. Plus, a single photo op can immediately throw the games right into the middle of a vicious culture war. And the friction here is immediate and intense. Just look at this breakdown. When Infantino meets with Trump to announce, a pretty standard visa program for World Cup ticket holders, the headlines get completely eclipsed by Trump pivoting to talk about Tren de Aragua gangs. When Infantino speaks at a football event, the conversation gets entirely sidetracked by political debates over transgender athletes. His intent, obviously, is to secure top-down federal support, but the actual resulting friction is that the games become a massive political lightning rod, leaving the local host cities to just fight amongst themselves over costs and security.
These real-world consequences are actively threatening the basic logistics of 2026. During a rally, Trump actually threatened to pull games away from cities run by his political opponents. And all this pandering hasn't even guaranteed a smooth relationship. Trump actually called Infantino a piece of work over FIFA's handling of Iran. Crucially, as of right now, there is still no agreement to halt ICE raids in host cities, which is usually a standard federal accommodation for these massive global events. Because of all this intense political noise and the total lack of federal-local coordination, municipal governments are increasingly pushing back. They're kicking fights about costs, and in some cases, they're opting out of auxiliary FIFA events entirely. Yet, despite all this localized friction in North America, Infantino's overall empire remains entirely secure. He's running unopposed for a 4th term. And just look out on the horizon. The 2030 men's tournament is going to span 3 continents. The 2031 women's tournament is expanding yet again. And famously, he bent the rules to secure the 2034 World Cup for one of his absolute staunchest allies, Saudi Arabia, a place where his top-down political playbook works flawlessly without any of that messy democratic friction. So, we'll leave you with this final, provocative thought. Right now, Infantino's political maneuvering has basically plunged the 2026 logistical buildup into chaos. But Infantino knows better than anyone that at pretty much every modern World Cup, scandals dominate the headlines right up until the very first game. He is betting billions of dollars that the exact moment the referee blows the whistle in 2026, the entire world is just going to forget the politics and watch the football. Will he be right? I guess we're going to find out. Thanks for joining this explainer.